So what's Lauren's plan for going back? Do they have one yet? Okay.
They're both going back.
Oh, okay.
What her schedule looks like if it's, I mean, she'll only be a sophomore, so maybe it'll all be online, which I'm paying a lot for online classes, but
Right.
I'm not gonna take her out her sophomore year either. You know,
Sure.
I don't know.
Sure.
Hopefully it changes. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Nobody has a crystal ball, right?
Nope. Not at all. Oh, there's Dean. It's a little lie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Guys, if either one of
How hot are these mics? How did you guys test?
I think Keegan and Angie tested.
Check. Pretty hot. Yep. Thank you. All set? Ready. It's not done.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. Okay, Secretary, call the roll.
Barry, here. Casper,
Here.
Jackson,
Here.
Lloyd,
Here.
Nenza,
Here.
Malloy.
Here. First up, item 3 is the transition plan for reopening.
Yes, thank you. So those of you that are returning from last week, you'll hear some repeat information. We feel like we want to go over the basics, at least for those that are hearing this for the first time. So first, I'd like to introduce that this effort was made up of a transition team that was a cross-section of leaders in the district, a diverse group of staff and administration, union leadership, and we considered stakeholder input that was gathered from 3 different rounds of surveys. We tried to make each round of surveys better. There was some misunderstanding each time whether or not parents were actually signing up for something. And what instead we were doing is trying to get to the bottom of, if we offered these options, which would you choose? Because the number of folks in each of those choices impacted our ability to do the others. Eventually, that transition team split into 3 subcommittees, one for school environment, health, and wellness, another for quality of instruction, and another for operations and facilities. The guiding principles that led our work was what is best for students, what is best for staff, and how do we balance safety and quality. The idea that the more we do in person, perhaps the less safe it would be, not the amount necessarily, but the population. And trying to offer a high quality of learning in an environment that we know is safe for students and for staff. Very challenging. First, just a taste of the ISB guidelines. ISB issued a 60-page document that was our primary resource. We considered many others, but ISB is the governing body of public education in the state of Illinois, and these are their guidelines. The general guidelines emphasized a return to in-person instruction, believed that that was important, and they said to do that consider 3 different scenarios. One is a full return to in-person instruction, one is a blended or hybrid model of remote and in-person instruction, and one is 100% remote. ISB's academic considerations, that there must be 5 hours of instruction required, in person or out, that's the minimum, and appropriate staff planning and collaboration time, understanding particularly in a remote environment that's not the teacher's natural habitat, which means there's a good deal of learning that needs to go in order to do that at a high level. Professional development needs, technology-based platforms in remote learning, certainly social and emotional health, which is suffering not only from the severity of the nature of the situation in the world right now, but also from the lack of the school environment itself, which often nurtures both. And a plan to return to full remote instruction if there's a resurgence or a second wave of the virus. The governor could literally at any time come back on and say, public education is full remote again, and we need to be prepared for that contingency. On the next slide, this is a summary of the health and safety consideration in the ISB document, the requirement of personal protective equipment, requirement of physical distancing, the desire to minimize student movement and mixing of students. Obviously, no more than 50 individuals gathering in one space. You see that modeled here tonight. And require that schools track symptom screenings and temperature checks, either self-certifying or us certifying that those criteria of students as they enter the building every day, and require an increase in school-wide cleaning and disinfection. You'll see later tonight that our plan includes all of those things. That was our guiding document. Here's the results of the surveys you see. You'll see when the survey came out in parentheses next to each. In June, families were asked what they would choose among 3 options, and staff was asked the same thing. They also had a any of the above option in theirs. And then again in July, families were asked if you were to choose between 2 options, what would you choose? And those are the results from those. And then since last Wednesday, many of you will recall another round of surveys. If given 3 choices, what would you prefer? The staff were given the same 3 choices. Just trying to get to the bottom of what population we could handle in person and feel like we were doing it safely. And if that number or fewer in any of the in-person options were interested in that, we believed that we could do it. And if the number exceeded that and we felt like we would have to compromise some of the safety guidelines in order to get it done. So you'll hear tonight from Wendy Wogan, who's our curriculum director, and Kelly Voliva, who's our director of student services, who are going to take you through the plan itself. So Wendy, take it away.
All right, can everyone hear me? So as Dr. Staywick mentioned, ISB had recommended 3 different types of learning models: 100% remote learning, 100% in-person, or a hybrid. And tonight I'd like to recommend a learning model where families can choose either a hybrid learning or enhanced full remote learning model. With that being said, I do want to note that families may switch models at the end of each trimester if desired, and students will be scheduled on the same family schedule during the hybrid model. So here's a closer look at the 2 models. Students will attend in-person learning 2 days a week and also attend in-person learning every other Wednesday in our hybrid model. We anticipate our class sizes to be approximately 16 for elementary and CMS in our hybrid model. And for our remote learning, students will engage in remote learning all 5 days, and we anticipate our class sizes to range in elementary from 15 to 24, in middle school 25 to 30. So here's a sample schedule of what that might look like in a hybrid model. During week 1, a student cohort in cohort A will learn in person Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then transition to remote learning for Thursday and Friday. During week 2, the same cohort A will participate in in-person learning for Monday, Tuesday, and then transition to remote learning for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. This schedule will continue throughout the trimester for the student. With this model, we are able to have students follow the same assigned teacher or teacher team, and this helps us provide cohesive learning between the in-person and remote learning. I'm going to turn it over to Kelly here because she would like to talk a little bit about our priority students in cohort C.
So when we're talking about the hybrid model, we're speaking of cohort A being one group of students, cohort B being the second, and then we also have what we have just been referring to as cohort C. And with cohort C, what we're really speaking to are students that are in what we know in the state of Illinois as priority categories. And those students are students that have disabilities or students that have English language needs. ISB does recommend in-person instruction be prioritized for students with disabilities and English language learners to the extent possible and necessary to serve individual students. What we commit to doing is working alongside families to individualize schedules for students in these priority groups that may benefit from more in-person instruction. What that means is that it's not that every student with a disability would have access to in-person instruction for additional days. They may have access, and it would depend on the needs of the student. So we would be looking back at their success with remote learning in the spring, their ability to participate with their peers on remote learning days, and if we determine that they require more additional instruction, we would be working with that family to bring them back in person on 4 additional days. Just also, I want to point out that if students are brought back in person for additional days, that in-person instruction will likely not be in a general education classroom. It will likely be in a more self-contained environment where they would be receiving their services, their therapies, of that nature. So because the nature of our cohorts, we're trying to keep those cohorts together. So if kids are there additional days, that will not be in a general education environment.
Okay, so thanks, Kelly. I just want to take a moment to share some considerations that we took into account when we were developing the hybrid model. And it includes, it keeps learning cohesive and allows for our students and staff to move fluidly between in-person and remote learning in the event we need to quarantine a classroom or a staff member or a group of students. It also helps us reduce the number of students present in the building daily by approximately a half, and allows us to adhere to the safety and health guidance with greater confidence. It also allows us to reduce the number of in-person live teaching staff interfacing with students daily and better support our staff accommodations. And lastly, it enhances remote learning teaching capacity for all of our staff in the event that the district would need to transition to full remote learning for all students. Remote learning, we know, cannot replace in-person learning, but we're going to make it a lot better than we did last spring. Here are just some enhancements that will make our remote learning better for the fall. There will be a 5-hour day of instruction with additional office hours. Teachers will be available to support students. We will have a combination of more direct instruction and independent learning with small group breakout sessions in Zoom. We streamlined platforms, Seesaw and Schoology. We'll have more of a balance of direct instruction using our tangible materials, and these are things like our curricular resources, class books, novel sets, math manipulatives, paper and pencil assignments, and digital instruction using online resources. We will revert back to our District 146 grading practices. They're traditional and standard-based. Certainly, we'll be taking attendance every day. One thing to note with the remote learning, we will look at students across the district who select remote learning. And so we will then allocate them to different remote learning classrooms across the district in order to keep the numbers very low and manageable and enhance the remote learning. We did some piloting this summer in our summer school with some of these enhancements. I just want to take a moment to give you some feedback and some ideas. We received a lot of positive feedback from our students, families, and teachers. Here again are some of the enhancements we piloted. We had more teacher-led direct instruction and small group instruction. We used a curriculum that aligned digital resources with teacher talk embedded and teacher-created mini-lessons that supported the independent learning. We were able to have teachers monitor student independent work while they were working with small groups. We also had an online resource that adapted the mastery level of our students. It helped target their gaps and fill them, and it also enhanced their strengths. Similarly, ELA followed the same pattern. Just a notable enhancement in ELA is we were able to offer a digital library that supported small groups and independent reading and allowed students and teachers to monitor their reading progress. We're going to offer similar schedules for in-person and remote learning, and as you can see there, just a couple samples. In person, we'll have 90 minutes of math in in-person schedule and 90 minutes of math in the remote schedule. Likewise, 90 minutes of ELA time and 90 minutes of ELA time in the remote schedule, and so forth. You can kind of see the breakdown there. Same for CMS. We're going to have a schedule where we'll have advisory, 30 minutes of SEL in person on our schedule, and 30 minutes SEL time for remote learning. We'll have 4 60-minute core classes for ELA, math, science, and social studies in person. Likewise, we'll have the same 4 60-minute core classes for remote learning. So you may have noticed on the previous slides that the instructional time for ELA and math are longer. And by adding this time to subjects, it allows us for more differentiation, remediation, and challenging our accelerated students. Parents of accelerated students, we heard your concerns about maintaining the integrity of the accelerated math program. This added time to our math class will ensure our goal that our accelerated math students will be prepared for the next grade level by receiving small group instruction in conjunction with digital online resources. Some other instructional program considerations we took into account. We know if we have to move to phase 3, all students will transition to remote learning. Some of the high priority students may continue receiving in-person instruction as we identified by individual teams. Kelly, would you like to speak a little more to that?
Just to piggyback on that, so if we were to move to phase 3, there may be students that still would benefit from some in-person instruction, particularly those students that would receive therapies such as OT and PT, things that need to be delivered in more of a hands-on manner. So that would be a consideration that we would have if we were to move to phase 3.
Also, another consideration, we want our teachers to be prepared for remote learning. So we have added remote professional development planning days on August 25th and August 26th, which would move our first day of school for students to Thursday, August 27th. Just a few other program and instructional considerations. As per the request of our parents, we consolidated our learning platforms. Students and parents will be provided training for Seesaw and Schoology. Students will also be provided physical distancing protocol training and health and safety expectation trainings. And we plan to have open house, curriculum nights, parent-teacher conferences held virtually. Kindergarten meet and greet will be in person, and 6th grade CMS welcome may be in person if we can do this safely. So what's going to change for our in-person instruction? We know that the classroom environment will be cleared of any unnecessary materials, furniture. Students will be arranged in rows. There'll be less socialization than usual, no flexible seating, and no carpet time. Makes me sad. Small groups provided with physical distancing. We'll have some limited teacher interaction following physical distancing guidelines, and we'll have to limit the sharing of our students' supplies. Now, Kelly's going to take you through a little bit about school environment and practices and protocols.
So a great deal of the school environment that we reviewed last week is similar this week, so I'm going to touch upon some main points and also highlight the things that have changed. So when we're talking about school environment, it goes anywhere from entering the school to transportation to cleaning, so it's a wide variety of different areas. So the first area that I want to point out is the requirements for building entry. Different than the plan that you reviewed last week if you were here. Last week we had recommended that staff certify and verify daily. There's a difference between self-certification and verification. So self-certification is reading through the list of symptoms, checking your temperature, saying, yes, I verify I have none of the symptoms related to COVID. The verification part comes with us going online, using an app, saying, yes, we have done the symptom checker, and yes, we are verifying that we are symptom-free and able to be at work. Our team recommended that for staff daily, and we were recommending it for students weekly. However, going back and revisiting some of the health concerns that came about through our feedback last week from the community and the staff, we are recommending that everyone certify and verify daily, which includes any student that will be on site in our building. If you are a family that chooses 100% remote, of course, that verification would not be necessary, but if your child is coming on site, at any point during the week, we would ask for that daily verification. The other thing we added, again, hearing feedback from others and doing a lot more research really is the temperature checks. So we do plan to do temperature checks for students daily. That will be done in person. We have already committed to the resources in order to do that, but we felt that that was another necessary step that we needed to take to protect the students and staff in the building. So those are the main differences in that area from last week to this week. Arrival and dismissal, we know that physical distancing is going to be absolutely necessary. Hallways, restroom, locker usage, we again know that we need to limit the number of students in the hall. Last week I touched upon some technology that we actually can use to keep track of how many kids are in the halls and different areas of the building at one time, so we will be utilizing that type of technology. I'm going to go and talk about classrooms a little bit. Nothing from last week to this week has changed much in our guidance, except that we did a lot more research, even more than we had done before, and did a lot of reading from different health organizations, comparing where is the discrepancy between the 3 foot and the 6 foot, where's the magic in that number. We know for our classrooms, we are recommending a minimum of 3 foot physical distancing of our students. They will be using desks. We will require face masks at all time unless they are outdoors eating or physically distanced at 6 feet. And you'll see there's a live link to the CDC guidance in there. Their schedules are going to be developed to limit the movement of students throughout the day, so the teachers will generally come to the cohort of students. The students will not be moving to other parts of the building, with the exception of lunchtime, which we'll talk about in a minute. Specialized instruction, however, may take place outside of the classroom. So if your student is receiving support from a speech therapist, for example, that speech therapist may be removing that child from the classroom to provide that one-to-one service. We will have modified instructional plans to reduce the use and sharing of student equipment. We are again looking at reducing our class sizes to maintain that physical distancing, and we will have limits on the use of large instructional and gathering spaces of 50 or less. Again, in looking back on, there was a lot of discussion and questions about the 3 foot versus 6 foot, so we felt it was important to include the resources that we reviewed and relied heavily on in weighing on that decision. I have not come across, nor have our team come across, anyone that recommends anything under than 3 feet as far as physically distancing students in the classroom. And we have not seen anything that doesn't require 6 feet if masks are removed. So those are the main resources that we used when our team was going through this guidance and trying to come up with a recommendation for the board to consider. As far as personal items, we know that we want to unfortunately discourage the use of borrowing right now. Something that we work hard on teaching our little guys, but we are going to try to limit borrowing of materials and kids using their own supplies. We will be encouraging students to bring their own water bottles to school. Every building will have an opportunity for kids to refill their bottles, and using bottle fillers or disposable cups. That will be worked out at the building level, but we are going to require we are going to recommend that students bring their own individual water bottles. Breakfast and lunch, we are recommending grab and go breakfast, which means if your child's in person that day, we will offer them breakfast to take home and eat at home the next day. Lunch, we are recommending in the lunchroom. We feel like that's the one time of day that students can move to a different location. The more research we did about the cleaning protocols that are necessary after students eat, we felt that we had the space to distance them 6 feet, and also had an opportunity to do some cleaning in between lunch periods with students. We will have to utilize, even within the hybrid model, we will have to utilize additional spaces in our building, such as the lunchroom and the gym, or the lunchroom and the media center. It will be dependent on the building to eat lunch, but we do feel that it's safer and good for the kids to actually be able to leave their classrooms and go eat lunch in a different location. Outdoor recess, we are going to allow kids to remove their masks if they can remain physically distanced at 6 feet. This will be very dependent on the student behavior and the teacher's ability to teach the kids how to remain physically distanced during recess. We hope that this can be accomplished. Right now, we are going to limit the use of playground equipment because, again, not being able to control how that is cleaned after use. extracurricular activities. At this time, clubs are going to be offered as many as possible virtually. Outdoor sports will be offered while maintaining physical distancing outdoors, outdoor fall sports. This may change depending on if we drop back down into a different phase, of course. This is all dependent on where we are. Field trips, assemblies, and other large gatherings are suspended at this time, although we've had access to some really great virtual field trips, which certainly can be added for students that we will definitely be considering. Curriculum nights, open houses, and other large community events we are hoping to offer remotely, and we're going to get creative in ways that we can do that until we can reopen fully. At this time, our committee is recommending that facility use by outdoor groups is suspended because, again, we're really trying to limit the number of people in the buildings to those that we know we can certify their health. Transportation, face masks will be required at all times while students are accessing the bus. Routes will have no more than 50 students on them. Buses will be cleaned and disinfected between routes, which may add to the length of route times. So we do share buses between CMS and the elementary schools. So you might see that your pickup time is a little later than normal because they are going to be cleaning and disinfecting in between those routes. And we are going to be assigning seats and encouraging siblings to sit together on the bus. As much as we know that's a time that we like siblings to be separated, my own girls included, they will be encouraged to sit together. There's been a lot of discussion around cleaning, so I'm going to jump to a separate slide. We talked a lot between last week and this week about the additional and enhanced cleaning. We spoke with our director of buildings and grounds, and really the cleaning that we do every day, he feels is a very deep cleaning. We are going to continue the routine cleaning. The custodial staff will be trained on the new COVID guidelines as they come. They already have been trained, but we will continue that training. There will be additional disinfecting of high-touch surfaces multiple times a day. And in order to do that, we are actively seeking additional staff at the buildings in order to maintain that high level of cleaning. We are using all EPA-approved disinfectants for coronavirus and other viral pathogens. Bottles of disinfectant and paper towels will be provided to staff in the classroom so that they feel they can use that when necessary. Those will be EPA-approved products for them to use. They are working with the HVAC engineers to maximize the airflow within the buildings. We are already installing alcohol foaming hand sanitizer and dispensers in every room, which is an enhancement and something that we did not have. We will disinfect desks, tables, and floors every night. And of course, as I had mentioned earlier, the tables will be disinfected after each lunch period. Last area, but certainly not least, which is why we're all here, is we're talking about general health, wellness, and safety. This is something that was our priority in developing this plan. We know that nothing has changed in this area from last week to this week. We are still recommending face masks for all of our students in the buildings at all times unless they are eating. Students can certainly bring their own face mask. We encourage families to start working with their children at home so that they build the stamina to wear the face masks. I know as an adult, I've been wearing this all day. I need to build my own stamina. It is very hard to wear a face mask all day, so we encourage you to work with your children on that. It's one less thing that the teachers will have to teach them upon they're coming back to school. We know that there are going to be circumstances where kids are not able to physically wear a face mask, and in those instances, staff will be provided additional PPE. We will have face shields available for all staff members and for student use if needed. That is not to replace the use of a face mask. We still want staff to wear face masks and face shields. We will also have gloves available and gowns if needed as well. Students that can't adhere to the health guidelines under normal circumstances may not be eligible for in-person instruction. So what that means is really if we have a student that is just, having a hard time refusing to wear the face mask, we are going to work with that student, work with the family, encourage the use of the face mask, But if that is a continuous problem, then we may be recommending remote instruction for that student, because again, it's a health and safety guideline. Our health and hygiene practices, we are going to increase our hand washing and sanitizing throughout the day. Each building will have different locations where that will occur. We know that upon arrival, it's important for hand washing, before and after lunch, sanitizing, after recess, and then again prior to going home. We are going to have increased signage. We already do have increased signage in all of our buildings. And again, we really are going to be, that first couple days back with students, really prioritizing what they need to do to follow those safety guidelines. And today we had a social work meeting with our social workers, and they were so great. And we talked a lot about what we can do to help support our students upon their arrival. That was the focus of our entire meeting. And what we don't want to do is make them anxious about this. So we were finding ways that we can create like fun activities and things that we can do to help teach them how to just the hygiene that's so important. So we are definitely focused on making them feel comfortable coming back to school. Going through the next areas is, again, we talked a little bit about the symptoms and temperature checks. Really everything you're going to see in our plan and our protocols are taken directly from the CDC and IDPH. We are not straying from those recommendations in any way. You will see the symptom checker. We are hoping to have an app that parents will use, and if there isn't an app available or the family has difficulty accessing the app, we will have a paper version available of the symptom checker that the families can use as well. But you will be asked to verify and self-certify symptoms daily using the app or the paper. And then again, these are our guidelines, which truly mirror the CDC IDPH guidelines for what to do if you have symptomatic or confirmed cases of COVID. There was some confusion about why 10 days versus 14 days, and as we looked into it, the 14 days really refers to the quarantine period, because obviously you're looking at an incubation period if you've been exposed. But the 10 days is if you have been symptomatic and you've been assumed to have COVID, or you've tested positive for COVID, you are allowed to return to school 10 days after or 10 days upon the time that the first symptom appeared. So that's really the difference between the 10 days and the 14 days. This is taken, again, directly from the CDC guidance. And this is, again, just the quarantine guidelines. This is a slide that we added just to clarify the difference between COVID positive versus quarantine. We do anticipate that there is going to be a time that a student or a staff member is in our building that has been exposed to COVID or test positive for COVID. That doesn't necessarily mean that every student in the classroom has to go under quarantine. It really is dependent upon the close contact, and the definition of close contact is within 6 feet for 15 minutes or greater. And if we can determine that there was minimal risk to that, then we would say that it isn't necessary for the entire class to quarantine. It's going to be really a case-by-case basis based on our contact tracing, and of course the school will notify families, notify staff if they have been put in any risk of being exposed to COVID. And I touched upon the social, emotional, and mental health piece. All students are going to be screened upon return. The one thing that didn't get added to the slide this morning is that we decided as a team that there will be an intake survey that we will ask all families to complete upon the start of school. And that intake survey really is just to give us information about any change in your environment since COVID, and if there's anything we can do to support you, your child, or your family. So that's something that you will receive once we get back to business. The staff will also complete a social emotional screener for our students. We have always completed a social emotional screener, but we're going to do it a little bit earlier this year. We have also began our journey on becoming a trauma-sensitive school environment. We have teams that have gone through training and are currently going through training on trauma-informed practices. This is something we were committed to as a district prior to COVID even becoming a reality, and now we feel like it's an even more important part of what we do. So that's going to be something we're going to go forward with. And last but not least, we will continue to update our available resources on our website as we have been. And this isn't just resources in our building or in our district, it is resources in the community that you can access if you're in need. And one thing I didn't include on the slide is our team focused a lot this morning on not just the social emotional needs of when we talk about our community, it's our students, it's our families, but it's also our staff. So we talked a lot about like what our staff needs from us in order for them to start the school year with, you know, fresh and feeling like they're safe and that they have the resources that they need as well. And that's,
Hey, great job, Wendy and Kelly. Thank you
Thank
both
you.
very much. So you'll see on the summary page the learning model itself, parent choice between a remote program or a hybrid program, which is a combination of the two. We've been living in this guidance since the day it came out. These 25 members of the transition team have made it their lives to get to the bottom of it. And there's a good number of people that think that we're putting too many kids in the classroom for it to be safe, and there's a good number of people that think we're not putting enough kids in order to get them the learning that they need. And there's a really good possibility that either one of those people are right. The bottom line is the virus is simply too new for us to know enough about it in order to really know exactly what to do. You'll see districts around the area doing a variety of different things, and you may ask, why can they do this and we can't, or why are we willing to do this and they are not? The bottom line is everyone on the committee believed that the best thing for kids was to be in school, and we also believed that it had to be a safe experience for them and for the teachers in order to do that with a clear conscience and to be responsible, to make a responsible decision. And this is where the team landed. So if you choose the remote, you'll be getting 5 days of instruction from home. And if you choose the hybrid, you'll be alternating 3 days of in-person instruction with weeks that have 2 days of in-person instruction, and you'll be remote learning on the other days.
Half the time.
This does a couple things for us. I think that we applaud teachers for those that went the extra mile last spring in the face of just the most random, ridiculous challenge you could ever face as a teaching professional, and completely change your practice. But I think everybody agrees that that version of remote learning is not adequate, particularly since we've had a summer to plan. We've got remote planning days built into the beginning of the school year. We have additional resources. Administration has been talking about how to improve the quality of remote instruction since the day we adjourned in June. It will not be as good as in-person instruction, but we're convinced it will be dramatically better than what you experienced in the spring. And teachers are committed to that and will be accountable for it. The nice thing about the hybrid is it makes all teachers remote teachers at least some of the time, which means if the governor moves us back to phase 3 and we're required to go full remote for all, your child will have a teacher who's practiced at it. That sounds a bit cart before the horse when I say it, but a bit more preparation in the spring would have resulted in a better experience last spring, and we weren't given that opportunity. And then there's a summary of the safety guidelines. Masks, you're going to have to wear it if you want to come to school. You have to adhere to the physical distancing guidelines. You must self-certify daily that you're coming to our school well. Frequent hand washing, disinfecting, enhanced cleaning procedures, and not to exceed 50 people in a space, and we're committed to those things. And frankly, I'm quite proud of the plan that the team developed. I don't believe that there's a plan that they could have presented that would have been popular across the board. There's too many different opinions about how this is supposed to go. We tried, our first attempt was to develop a program that gave you a choice of 5 days in or 5 days out. We would have been disappointing the people who have been asking for a remote or for a hybrid model, and there's a good number of people that have. But I really thought that the people who thought the virus really isn't that big of a deal and I really need the kids to be in school, and those that believe it's a very big deal and don't want to expose their kid to it at all would each have their own choice. At the end of the day, the total population of each campus in that model was too high for the transition team's comfort based on the ISB guidelines. And that's why we landed where we are today. The slideshow is available to those of you viewing at home, and those of you that would like to review it, it'll be available to you. You don't have to copy it down. And if you do access it electronically, all of these links on the resource page are all live links, and they'll take you right to the actual data that we were considering.
Where is it, Jeff, on the district website?
Yeah, Keegan, district website, also district Facebook page. Can we do that? Maybe each school building's Facebook page. Can we do that? I'm getting thumbs up from Keegan. Thank you, Keegan. I've never heard him say no. Phenomenal. Hats off to the team and to Keegan's effort. Everyone's been working really hard for really extraordinary long hours to present something that we knew would disappoint a good number of people. I hope the board can support it tonight. We really think it's the right blend of risk and reward for education. We need to get these kids back. They need to be in school, but we need to do it in a way that respects the seriousness of the virus and also protects the district from an exposure standpoint in executing the ISB guidelines. So thank you all for your consideration. I'm happy to take comments or questions from the board.
Andy, can you?
I have a question about the curriculum here. If we had a kid who, the remote learning will follow what the classroom learning is as well. So if there's a child who's sick and cannot come to school that day, they can just jump in on a remote learning and be getting the same lesson they would be getting in classroom.
Yes, that's right. So if you're a hybrid student who can't attend school on the day that you are in person, Wendy, maybe you can answer the question better than I can.
Well, we're currently making sure that our curriculum is aligned, and we're expecting both the hybrid teachers and our remote learning teachers to follow that curriculum. So with that collaboration between the two, we should see as much mirrored instruction and learning of those standards going on in both the remote and in person. So absolutely.
Yeah. So Wendy, just to be clear, I want to make sure that I understand. If you and Kelly are both teachers of the same thing, and you're a Group A teacher and Kelly's a Group B teacher, and one of your students is absent on an in-person day, they can join Kelly's class on that remote day?
That was my question. If an in-person student is not going to make it that day, can they just jump into a remote?
I'm not sure that's a consideration that we've modeled yet.
They'd be able to make up that missed learning in the remote learning classroom. So they follow the same teachers. So when they're out on then they would be able, if your next day was remote, that teacher would help them catch up with that material because they'll have that same teacher for both in-person and remote. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that.
Can I ask a question, piggybacking on that? I'm a little confused by that. So will all teachers have the same plans, or will teachers have autonomy to do something? For example, if they're going to do the 3 remote days and then the 2 on days, when they're in the remote days, will teachers always be, every teacher and every grade level be doing the same thing, or will they have autonomy to do, in the springtime, everybody got the same plan? Will the same plans come to everybody on the remote days, or will teachers be doing their plans?
So sorry, Jill, make sure I understand.
Maybe that's a lot of questions right there.
That's okay.
Trying to explain where I'm trying to go.
Forgive me if I don't answer it right, but my understanding is what we're trying to do is create cohesion in our programming, especially keeping them with the same teacher. So teachers that are teaching in person and teachers that are teaching in the remote, they're following a guided curriculum. So those standards will be covered in both learning models. When you say autonomy and differentiation and remediation, yes, that's going to be happening, but to the extent to meet the students' needs. But as far as the same curriculum, we're trying to mirror that as best we can. So in both models, so that there is consistency and equity for our students. Does that make sense?
So just like before where we have the same standards,
Yep.
but teachers may deliver it differently depending on the students
Yeah,
in the
they need to
classroom.
have that ability to meet student needs through that differentiation and remediation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
So, again, in the hybrid platform, talk to me about what the remote learning day looks like if I'm a hybrid student. So if I'm on a 3-day week, I'm in the building Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, what does my Thursday, Friday look like?
You're going to continue the learning from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Can you hear me?
Get a little bit closer.
Okay. We'll continue the learning from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday with the same teacher. So they would go through a schedule, just like a sample schedule, where if they were getting 90 minutes of math instruction in the in-person, that same 90-minute schedule is in the remote. And what they learned on Wednesday, they continue with the next lesson on Thursday and the next lesson on Friday. Does that?
Yes, thank you.
Can I ask a question about the, in the slides there was a K-5 sample schedule, and in that there's a 60-minute of homework and intervention time, and that's different from before. So you can just elaborate maybe more on what that would look like?
Absolutely, Julie. We put that in there because we know and have identified, even through our summer school, as much as we did try to cover standards in the spring, there's learning loss, and there are great gaps of learning loss. So we put that additional time for intervention and homework in there so that we can take a look at the skills and deficits or the learning gaps that our students have and continue to fill those gaps so that there is cohesion from learning those third grade skills and standards to fourth grade. So if we find, for instance, that a fourth grader is missing 3 standards from their third grade, we want that time to fill that. Otherwise, they're going to continue to struggle in fourth grade if they're missing those essential skills that need to be built on for learning. So we put that extra block in for that time.
So if there was a class of 16 students, then a teacher, it would be like an individualized time per student? And
very small group or individualized, yes. If we have 3 students who have the same skill needs, we can do a small group and fill that skill needs following the physical distancing.
While the rest of the students are doing homework?
Yeah, we've identified some really, I feel confident, some very strong resources that are helping students also fill those gaps independently, that has built-in teacher talk and lessons right there. So it helps support the independent learner while the teacher is meeting in small group with the other students and rotating that. So all students are getting direct teacher instruction as well as being supported by independent learning in that resource. Go ahead.
I also want to add that we have additional staff that are in those classrooms. So that's a time where paraprofessionals, special education teachers, interventionists, ELL teachers can be used to help support whatever the groups are in that classroom. So that is a natural time. We actually have that time built in our existing schedules. It's a time where everyone consistently gets their support. This is just chunked differently in the schedule the way you're seeing it. It looks different in our schedules the way it existed before.
Thank you.
I have a question about this model specifically. So my understanding, just looking at the schedules, it's our expectation that a hybrid learning kindergartner every other week is going to be on Zoom for about 20 hours a week. And do we really feel that's a realistic expectation?
The one thing, and I agree with you, John, the ISBE's guidelines are that we're going to follow 5 hours, and I know that's difficult for small children, but we are also, when we craft this remote learning plan, there will be built-in breaks. There'll be built-in some specials to give them a break, and we'll try to chunk that, not maybe 5 hours straight of learning, for sure not. That would be tough. But to build in those natural breaks and those activities that give them that rest from going 5 hours straight. We understand that 5 hours is very difficult.
Can I add to that a little bit?
Sure.
Some of the magic in building in planning time before the first day. So we're afforded 5 remote planning days for the school year, and we've chosen to ask for 2 of them before the first day of school, which will move the first day of school for students back 2 days. But those 5 days to be used throughout the school year count as student attendance days. So it's not, students aren't going to have to go longer into the summer. But the nice thing about it is it allows grade level teams of teachers to plan out conscientiously and age appropriately how to schedule the day, both in person and remote. So the experts at each grade level will be the ones making the call for how much they think students can handle at a given time, and they'll also have the authority to adapt that, how they chunk their day, as they learn about how well their students move through the program.
Also, on this model, we've talked a lot about COVID safety. There's a lot of families, obviously, that have 2 parents working outside the home. What consideration has been to the whereabouts of these young children on the 3 days that they're not in as it relates to COVID? Do we feel as though, what consideration was given, I guess, to the fact that a child, there's no daycare right now, or daycare is certainly less safe than this. So, they might be at 3 different houses on 3 different days. And do we find that preferable to a situation where a kid's in a classroom 5 days a week and we know where they are? How were those factors weighed when we were landing at this conclusion?
Yeah, the best picture that I can paint is a teeter-totter with richness of experience and the amount of the student experience in school at one side and safety at the other. But you're introducing kind of an important ancillary effect that maybe isn't on the same teeter-totter, because we certainly don't have control over what happens to the students when they're not in our care. It's very challenging. We've spent a lot of time talking about it.
And so I guess that's what I'm saying is, how did we arrive that it's safer for the kids to be out of our care more frequently as opposed to less?
Yeah, it really just came down to the bottom line of how many students we felt like we could fit into school buildings safely when they're here.
So we felt then, we're saying that the potential for our students to be exposed to a larger number of people was a lower risk than the potential that the students were exposed to a smaller universe of people for a longer period of time? Is that's
a really tough, you're asking a really tough question, because
I understand.
I'm assuming there's going to be a myriad of different parent responses and what individual families are going to do. Fortunately, the government has afforded families a couple things that haven't been available to them in the past. If their typical child care isn't available to them, there's enhanced FMLA that's available to them, so they can get leave from their job if they have to. I'm not suggesting this, or these are all very private, personal, individual decisions of parents. We are going to still continue to offer Ivy League. I don't know to what extent that can be expanded. That's certainly something we can look into. But how individual parents should or could care for their kids on days that they're not in school, I don't have a great answer for that, Rick. It's just tough. It's just really hard. The situation is a hand that I haven't met anybody who is at all pleased to have been dealt it. And the matter of fact is that we're just trying to do the best that we can.
With regards to older students, middle school students, it seemingly every week last year we were getting updated on students that are vaping, students that are using marijuana, students that are did we consider, when we were considering the overall health of the students as it relates to COVID, did we consider at all the fact that these students are going to be far more isolated in what you guys are proposing? That's going to, in all likelihood, probably lead to greater abuse of vaping, greater abuse of marijuana, greater abuse of self-harm in a hybrid model than in a 5-day-a-week model, and how did we weigh those factors against one another?
Yeah, so a good deal of consideration was given to that. We do intend to give all students social emotional screening, whether they're choose remote or hybrid, and we will have the resources of social emotional resources available to all students regardless of model. That slide where we talked about students with profound needs can be handled individually, and that we're prepared for that cohort C to get more individualized programming. Certainly if we feel like a student who doesn't qualify for special education services, doesn't qualify for English language services, but is in dire need of social emotional services, that we can find a way to provide that in a individual student basis. And that's just the best that we can do.
I take it we're going to be evaluating the success of this program as we move along. So we're committing until we go to phase 5. Are we committing for just the first trimester? How long are we planning on doing it until further notice?
Yeah, so parents are asked to commit for a trimester. I think it's easier from a logistics standpoint to move a student from hybrid to remote, which means if a family sends their kid to school the first week or two and thinks, ooh, I'm not comfortable with this, I'd like my student to go full remote, we may be able to make that switch sooner. It's much more difficult to plan for a student who signed up for remote to transition into the hybrid model, so that's one that will likely have to wait for the trimester break. Of course, if I feel like at any time it's not working, it's not safe enough, or it's unnecessarily too safe and therefore we're not reaching enough kids, I can certainly bring amendments to the plan to the board at any time. The board will ratify this for 1 school year. That's just so that you don't have to keep recommitting to it, but that doesn't mean that you can't improve it, amend it over time as we learn and get our feet into it. And you better believe that if this team finds a way that they can make it better, they're going to be loud about it. And when they're loud about something, I'm loud about it. So you're the first people that I tell.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
It's in the resolution that you're asking us to pass today on the duration of effect, where you just said that we're ratifying it for a whole year. You and I have had several conversations about the importance of the 5-day and the health of the staff. And you're telling us that it's not possible to do the 5-day. So in the resolution it says that there is a reasonable time to restore normal operations. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate what that might look like. Like, for example, if the declaration of the pandemic were to end, I can't remember the word that was used in it.
So if we go from stage 4 to stage 5, for example?
How long would it take for us to move kids back to
Yeah,
5 days?
That's a really interesting question, because the governor has been clear that he won't move the state till phase 5 unless there's either a vaccination for COVID or an effective treatment. What he hasn't said is there any, what are the sub needs? So we've got a vaccination, it's approved on Monday, and no one's had it yet. Does that mean he's going to go to stage 5 on Monday, or is he going to wait until 20% of the population has it, or 50%? He hasn't said. Your question, I think, is once he goes to phase 5 and says it's okay, go ahead.
It's not necessarily when he goes. I know that we have to follow ISB's guidelines, and it's my goal to, as long as everybody can be safe, to get everybody back to school.
Right. Yeah, so the day that
so
we...
if it's open, I don't know if there, nobody has a crystal ball, if the governor's going to say, okay, now it's fine.
Right.
I just want to know what our, I assume our goal is that, and then the resolution is just a bit unclear to me because it says reasonable, and maybe can't say what reasonable is because you also can't tell the future either, but I just wanted more elaboration on that.
I think I understand a little bit better now. So you're approving this for a year, but you also get to approve something else whenever
I don't
you
want it to last a year.
Right.
Can you make the pandemic go away?
Yes, right. I really wish I could. So there's going to be a day. There's going to be a day where this board feels like it's safe to return to either business as usual or some variation of business as usual. When that happens, the principals will need a little bit of time for all of the stuff. They're going to need to assign kids that were previously remote to classes. They're going to need to regroup students. They're going to need to probably, a good number of students may change teachers in order to do that. So there's going to be some administrative effort that's going to need to happen, but the administrators and the teachers are licking their chops to get back to normal. So I can promise you a lot of hustle when that happens. I don't know exactly how long that will take, but I think that everybody on the team shared the yearning for back to normal. So I think we'd be able to move pretty quickly.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a couple questions about the model that's not being recommended and why we didn't ultimately recommend it. And that being specifically a 5-day-a-week in-school option and a 5-day-a-week out-of-school option. You said that the group, the planning committee, whatever we call it, they were ultimately uncomfortable with the total number of students in the building. Are you aware of any guidance from ISB, the CDC, the AAP, any other, the IDPH, that mandates the maximum number of students in a building?
No.
Okay. So let me ask you this question. So we went through the numbers on a high level today, and we say we had in the primary schools an average of about 25 students in a normal circumstance, 20 to 25 students in a classroom. And we've surveyed we surveyed parents and found in a binary option approximately 63% of students or families are planning on sending their students full-time if we were to offer that as an option. Now that would, if you just do simple math and you say 20 to 25 times 63%, we're talking about something in the ballpark of 12 to 16 students per classroom, which is something that we have indicated we thought we could do, that we could fit that number in a classroom and adhere to all social distancing protocols, in theory. That's correct?
Yes.
So what I want to understand is, given that those circumstances were the case, did we ever actually put pen to paper and model out a scenario to see if that we could actually make a 5-day work? Did we actually build student attendance models to see if we could make such a scenario work?
We did build, kind of is my answer. Let me explain. We did identify students by school and grade level in that survey. Mm-hmm. And by asking them their first and second choice, we were able to kind of get to the bottom of how many we think we would have present in that binary model that you just described in each grade level of each school building. And there were some grade levels that we believed that they would fit rather neatly within the number of classrooms that we have to give to that grade level.
When you say the number of classrooms, do we consider the music room, the art room, the media center, these are all available classrooms?
Yeah, so
presumably we're not going to those classrooms. These kids won't be going to those. Music and art will be coming to them, right?
That's right. So there are some spaces that are typically used for other things that are available to us, but there's also a good number of new needs that we need to repurpose some of these rooms. So the principals haven't gotten to the bottom of how many different spaces they're going to need to feed students lunch. That's one factor, because the guideline says you have to clean the space before you can resume instruction in the classroom, or clean the space before you allow other kids to come in and use it. We also have to have, I don't know if they came up with a better word, it's horrible, a quarantine room or a holding room for anybody who shows up with a fever or comes down with symptoms during the day. There's some other space that needs to be used in other ways, other unique ways, but we do also gain some space because of the way we're going to be delivering instruction. So yes, we did give consideration to the total number of spaces available. The problem is in the remainder. So I told the team with a good deal of confidence, listen, we had 16, 17, 1,800 respondents. That's a huge sample, so there should be a pretty good distribution. Mary Day, you're going to have to back me up on this. I need your math brains. With that size sample, there really should be a pretty decent distribution throughout your groups, no matter how you group them, because it's just such a good number of respondents. But when we did group them by grade level, by building, we found that none of them were nicely divisible by the number of folks that we felt like we could fit into a classroom. So if we feel like in this building we can put 16 students in a classroom safely, there may be 16 students in this classroom and 16 students in that classroom, and then we've got 8 in a third classroom, or 11. You don't get to fill those other seats with someone of a different grade. Multi-age, multi-grade, that's a whole other type of teaching and learning that we're not trained at. So you've got all of this leftover space that's, wasted, so to speak. Of course, we wouldn't do it that way. We'd put 13 in each room. We wouldn't put 16, 16, and 8, right? We would evenly distribute it. But if we felt like there was room for 16 in each classroom, and the number that we have coming from that grade level isn't divisible by 16, we're going to waste some chairs, so to speak. You do that in a couple grade levels, and all of a sudden you're a room or two short. What we weren't willing to give on is squeezing a 17th kid in or doing those types of things, because we kind of felt like you had to draw a line somewhere. And the example I'm using that fits 16 students, that number may be a bit different in different size classrooms in different buildings. I'm just using that as an example.
But I guess that's my point, is that a music room or an art room is typically a larger classroom.
Sure.
If we had a class that had, say, a 17th or an 18th kid, but we could fit that class into the music room, and we had another class that was we only needed 12 or 13, but we have a smaller space where we could fit that. My point is, without going through the actual exercise, without actually putting pen to paper, without actually doing the models, seeing how they're shaking out, and then saying, I don't see how we could say with confidence that this can't be done. I look around, I know, like, as we've discussed, Frankfurt, Mokina, New Lenox, Lamont, I believe I heard Oak Forest, Mantino. These are all districts that found a way to get it done. A lot of them have student-to-teacher ratios that are higher than ours. I know you've discussed with me that that's not always a transferable thing, but I'm just saying, when you look at it on the surface, there is a way that some of these other places, some of our peers, some of our neighbors have been able to find a solution that I am assuming is compliant with ISB guidelines and with CDC and AAP and the rest. And I feel like there was some due diligence that we still could have done in order to flesh this out a little bit more. I guess that's, and I know we disagree about that, but I think that that was something that should be at least put on the record for the public. There's a lot of people in here that feel the same way I do, and I want to make sure they hear that we did not do the full modeling exercise that we've done for other scenarios for a 5-day in-school option.
Yeah, do you mind if I react to that, Rick?
Yes. I don't mind. I'm
okay.
Sorry.
So I'm going to kind of change the subject, and it feels like I'm doing that because I feel like I lost the first round of that argument, and that could be fair. Some of the other things that the transition team was concerned about had to do with total campus population. So you heard particularly Kelly go through the certifying health of every human that enters the building every morning, and how many kids can fit on a bus, and feeding the kids. There's a good number of just moving kids throughout the building. There is something to be said for limiting total building population. Now, I don't feel like I can really say that on strong feet out of one side of my mouth without telling you we didn't determine exactly how many students we felt like we could stomach at each campus. Like, I'm making kind of a soft argument, but there were some people in the room that felt very passionately about how difficult it's going to be for us to certify the health of everybody that enters the building at 40 or 50% of our population, and couldn't imagine how difficult it would be at 60 or 65 or 70 or 72% of our population. I also was interested in some of the same things that you were, and I reached out to several of the superintendents of the districts that you mentioned. I haven't heard Oak Forest yet. I know their superintendent very well.
I will say that was a bit more of a rumor, so I can't
Okay.
confirm that. I just heard that.
But I talked to districts, some of the districts that you mentioned, and I don't want to talk about them individually, but I spoke to 5 superintendents this afternoon. And one of them was in a school district where they had 88% of respondents demanding in-person 5-day. The political landscape of the district was such that they weren't going to tolerate anything else. And the result is elementary class sizes of 22 and middle school class sizes of 25 to 27. And those are pretty good class sizes in peacetime. Maybe they've got larger square footage of rooms. These were calls that I made today, so I didn't go and do site visits or anything like that. There was another district that I talked to, very dear friend of mine, superintendent there, and they have 3,000 students total in 8 campuses, and 2,000 of them they anticipate requesting remote learning. They're expecting 1,000 to sign up for in-person instruction. They've had 550 sign up for it so far. It hasn't been open that long. They really think they're going to hit their model of 1,000. But man, if we had 1,000 students in 8 different campuses, I would feel pretty confident in offering a 5-day program too. I guess what I'm saying is, every district's different. There's a reason why ISB left some of the judgment to local school boards. It's that there's school districts in the state that think that this is the scariest thing that they've ever come in contact with, and there's others that think it's a complete rubbish. We live in a school district where it really feels like there's a good balance of everywhere in between. And it's a particular challenge when the will of the community isn't obvious. Now, when we did ask them for 3 things, most respondents chose the 5-day in-person option. And that's why we shot for it really hard. It's not a majority, but it was certainly a plurality. Second place was in the mid-30s. We took that very seriously. We shook fingers at each other. We shook fists at each other. We doubled the length of every meeting that we had scheduled to try and get it done. And at the end of the day, we could do it. You could just put more kids in every classroom. That's just how you do it. You just put more kids in every classroom. And it would still be less than we're used to having in every classroom. But there comes a point where you're not being conscientious about exercising the distance. And we spent a lot of time trying to get to the bottom of the magic of 3 feet masked and 6 feet unmasked, because it just seems like there's a lot of smart people saying it without a lot of great data. Like I said, the virus is still very, very new. There was a good study, a study that was supported by a couple renowned American and European doctors, done in South Korea, that studied 68,000 young people. And it confirmed what doctors had been saying, that they don't think that students under 10 that are asymptomatic and positive transmit the disease at a high rate to others. That was really reassuring. what was really scary is that the 10-year-olds and up, 10 to 18-year-olds, did transfer the virus to others at the same rate as adults. So that's the fourth grade through high school. It's half of our students. So, I don't know. I don't know where the science is going to land. I don't know the story that we're going to tell about COVID in 10 years. But there was an amount of students per classroom that the team could stomach, and the team was big and diverse and full of really smart and big-hearted people. And we disagreed as much as we agreed. We disagreed more than we agreed, just like this room does, I'm sure. And this was our best effort. This is where we landed.
The last thing I'll say, and then I'll move on, is just to say that, I've been a part of the board now for, I guess, nearly 4 years. And in that time, the vast majority of our efforts have really been focused on improving the physical state of the buildings of our district. We've spent, I think, nearly $20 million adding on, renovating, investing in a full-day kindergarten program. To my knowledge, whenever you and the rest of the administration has come to us with a funding request, I think we've always come through. I don't think we've ever hardly said no. And so I guess what's disappointing is, if truly the issue is just the density, and it seems like we're close, why didn't you guys come to us with funding requests for mobile classrooms? Maybe we could put up temporary walls in media centers, create a few classroom spaces where we could get fewer children in there, stuff. I mean, we have a very healthy fund balance, and, it's for presumably a rainy day, and this is the rainy day. And it just doesn't seem like any of that was given any consideration when we were talking, when we're going with these proposals. And I wish that you had come to us, because I think if what you're saying is that we're just a little bit short on the density, I think there's potential solutions for that, and I'm not sure that they were ever totally considered. And that's disappointing, because we've always been willing to spend money. We have money to spend in the event that something like that would get us across that finish line. It's just a comment, I guess. It's not really a question.
I have a question about we've done 2 surveys, and those surveys were hypotheticals. We were asking them a hypothetical. If we approve this later tonight, we're going to have reality for the parents to make a hard decision. I'm worried about that. Will every parent get their choice? What I mean by that is, if we get in one building in 3rd grade, we get too many want to be hybrid. They're certainly not going to want to go to another building, I wouldn't think. Or could we offer that to them before and if that does happen, are there protocols to decide? Somebody's going to have to decide they don't get what they want. Do we have some families both parents have to work, and it may be that this fits their lives the best.
Kelly, you may be a bit better suited than me. Do you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, we talked a lot about this, and as a matter of fact, we spent quite a bit of time talking about, could we do 100% in-person, 100% remote? Can we offer all 3? And a lot of the discussion that we had about offering all 3, or offering even in-person versus 100% remote, was that we would have to have a cutoff. We would have to have a cutoff, because there's only a certain amount that we could put into a classroom and maintain the social distancing guidelines. So the other point of us recommending the hybrid as a team was because we feel we can say yes to every single parent that wants hybrid. We could not say yes to every single parent that wanted 100% instruction or if we had a combination of all three. We feel very confident in the model that we're presenting that no one would not get what they wanted in this model.
Dean, if we do run into a scenario where it's impossible to do that on a campus, everybody in the room seemed open to entertaining, well, let's give parents another choice then. You know, if we can't cause this to happen in the normal way, maybe we can make it happen in a bit unusual way. And then they'd have a choice between that and the other option. But we really think we can give it to everybody.
That's one of the reasons we chose it.
Is there any more questions from the board? And moving on, let's open it up to public comment. Is there anybody that would like to address the board? You could step up to the mic and put your name. Is the piece of paper on there? You could put your name on the piece of paper.
That mask is going to be awesome on Valentine's Day. Maybe we won't be wearing them on Valentine's Day. That'd be nice. Hi, Renee.
Good evening. My name is Renee Benedetto, and I am the Secretary of the Teachers Union representing the 223 certified staff educators of District 146. Over the past few weeks, I know that the board and administration have been flooded with phone calls and emails from parents, community members, and educators, all with various opinions on reopening. The Teachers Union has also been flooded with such messages, and tonight I would like to share a few of the words that these teachers have shared with us. First and foremost, remote learning has gotten a bad rap, and it actually saddens me. The spring is not indicative of what we can do if given time and proper training. I am currently working summer school remotely at a grade level I am not used to kids I have never met in person, and I love it. I feel connected to the students in my room. I am collaborating with my co-teachers. We are constantly learning new tricks and throwing around ideas to make the learning better. It's not easy. We spend hours planning, Saturday night till 10 p.m., Sunday morning, couple more hours, and it is definitely not ideal, as there are technical issues. Storms have knocked out our internet. But with some of the pre-planning and organization that has gone into summer school remote learning, it is far more copacetic than it was back in March. And I can only guess with adequate training and planning time, the same could be the case in August. Which brings me to the second point, quality of instruction. So let's be really honest for a minute. What will be the quality of instruction when we cannot teach in the way we've been trained is best practice? Collaborative group work, workshop model, individual conferencing, using manipulatives, and small group instruction is key to most instruction. But there is no way we can achieve this with the desks and rows whole group instruction world that will be required of in-person teaching during a deadly pandemic. There is no logistical way to meet student needs while consistently adhering to safety guidelines. Add this to ensuring students keep proper social distancing at all times and adhere to the mask policy. The stakes aren't just high here, they are literally life and death. The heart of teaching is a connection, and being in person doesn't make the connection any more or less. It's about one person making the other feel like he or she matters. How is a 5-year-old going to feel when they can't hold hands with their best friend down a hallway or hug their teacher? How is a 10-year-old going to feel not getting a high five after answering a tough question? How is a 13-year-old going to feel not being able to sit with their friends at lunch? And how is the staff going to feel constantly telling these children to stay away from each other? With adequate time, my colleagues and I can prepare for and subsequently provide stellar instruction. And I am confident that we can make meaningful connections even in a virtual setting. Teachers adapt every minute of the school day. None of us are asking for a pass or an easy assignment. What we're asking for and what we must demand is a safe assignment. As we are a district that has always been data-driven, I am confused as to why the data isn't being used in this situation. As of today at 12:15 p.m., Illinois had 163,703 confirmed cases, 4% of the U.S. totals. Break that down to our district, and that means about 9 teachers and 95 students will possibly become infected. This does not include any other support staff, and the numbers are still rising. Looking at time, 6.5 hours a day, if not more for staff, times 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 times a week can add up to 26 hours of exposure for students and teachers compared to 0 hours if we were all remote. That is a long time to be in a confined space with a large amount of people. Guidelines tell you not to be in a grocery store for more than 30 minutes and to buy 1 to 2 weeks worth of food per trip to limit the time spent in an indoor public place. And mind you, people are also instructed to keep 6, not 3, feet of distance while in the store. Putting up to 16 students in a classroom violates the safety guideline put out by a national agency. Workers, cashiers, bank tellers have barriers between them and the public. Many doctors and therapists aren't seeing patients for visits and are choosing virtual appointments. Yet, schools seem to be in session for 6.5 hours a day. The IFT even came out and said they recommended a fully remote learning model. I could go on and on with data that tells us that remote learning is the safest option, but I am sure you all realize that. And of course, there are still those unanswered questions that so many of us have about in-school teaching. What happens when a child or staff member tests positive, or a family member? Where will these subs come from? Where will schools put a quarantine room while trying to maintain social distancing, therefore using up any? What exactly will happen if schools are shut down again? How does a teacher properly instruct if they can't walk around the classroom to see student work? Is the district prepared to hire 10 or more teachers in case current teachers resign or take a disability leave? What will be the protocol for students who show up to school sick or become sick during the day? What if parents are unable to pick them up? The list goes on and on. Unfortunately, this is not a time when we can make it up as we go. We need answers and protocols and training and resources. Are we really ready? As much as teachers love their students and miss teaching in person, is it safe to return to the classroom right now during a national pandemic? None of us asked for or want this situation. We want to get back to school and do what we love, what we were trained to do. The community is right. We should be in school, but at what cost? As humans, we must always put ourselves into this situation to realize the true magnitude of it before we can truly understand the horror and sacrifice being asked of others. I have no doubt that you feel this weight on your shoulders and that you would never wantonly put anyone in a dangerous situation. However, in your professional role, you are undoubtedly influenced and pressured by the public to open up, even if only in some capacity. Through the nature of this situation, you have an added layer to complicate and contradict what would otherwise be clear, impartial judgment. When countless teachers are saying, "I'm afraid to be in a classroom during a global pandemic," people should listen. I know you are on beyond competent leaders, and I am imploring you to think about what you're asking teachers to do. Can you tell us we and the children, your children, will be safe? If the answer is not undoubtedly yes, then that should answer the question of how school should look in the fall. For the safety of our community, starting the year with remote learning is our best option as we continue to monitor the effects of this national pandemic. Thank you.
Members of the board, administration, fellow teachers, and parents. My name is Russell Golden. I'm an English teacher, I'm a school librarian, I'm the husband of a teacher, I'm the father of 2 boys attending Carrick. For all of that, I served in the United States Navy as a raidman on board the submarine fleet. My fast attack boat, I learned so many lessons. We wouldn't have time to go through all of them, but there was one important lesson that I learned that I think that we all need to consider, and that was the concept of mission risk. I sat through many meetings on mission planning and execution and watched my captain and our leaders do what I call the grave calculus before they decided how they would put the boat in harm's way. We would receive our orders. It was then up to every individual captain and each department to figure out how we would approach that tasking. The 3 things that one captain in particular used all the time really inspired me whenever I think about any time I take a risk, is that my knowns must outweigh the unknowns. You must be aware of who you are, and that surviving is not winning. First of all, if your knowns are not greater than your unknowns, in other words, if you know less than if you can't count for, you're not saying you have to count for every single emergency, but the idea is that if you're going to determine the cost of risk, you have to understand what you do know and the possibilities of what could go wrong. Dwight D. Eisenhower famously said, "If plans are useless, but planning is essential." And if we make plans, eventually the unknown will come up. And if we plan well, the unknown's not quite so scary. You also have to know the value of your unknowns. It's possible to have 1,000 known factors that make it seem as if the mission's going to succeed. But if the one unknown is, by the way, it's possible they have a brand new anti-submarine warfare platform out there, and we will totally be dead if we go against this thing. Probably not a good way to take on that mission. You have to value your intelligence. Trust that the information you receive is good. Verify it when possible. An example of COVID-19. There are currently, according to the CDC, the WHO, and Illinois' own Board of Disease Control, 17 known facts about COVID. I'm not going to list them, you can find them in your zone. However, here are a couple unknowns that I was able to come up with thanks to these lists as well. For instance, we know how it can be transmitted, but there are also other possible transmissions. It could be transmitted orally, it could be transmitted possibly airborne, it could be a tactile transform, touched by touch. These are all still possibilities on the table. We don't know exactly how this disease spreads. And that's the thing, is the number of ways that we don't know how this disease works far outnumber the ways that we know that do work, how it does work. We don't know exactly how it affects children. Just today, a 9-year-old died in Florida. The youngest death in Florida, a state that's rife with death. And for a long time, we thought kids were okay. Maybe not. We actually don't even know the true number of cases or deaths related to COVID-19 because we don't test enough. We don't know the mechanism of this disease in and of itself. We don't even know its biological structure. We know it's a virus, we know it's protein-based, but beyond that, we really don't know a lot. We don't know the effects of the survivor's immune system, long-term or short-term. It is safe to assume that COVID is the most researched topic on Earth right now, with epidemiologists of the entire planet studying its effects, traits, transmission, but there are doctors, biologists, chemists, sociologists, psychologists, civil engineers, military leaders that are looking at this disease. And the list that the 17 facts that we do know about COVID, that's all we know in 6 months of study. We know more about star HD 7423, which is 1,500 light years away, which is 9 quadrillion miles. That's 9 with 15 zeros. That was discovered in March this year. We know more about that star than we do about COVID-19. Another thing to consider is who we are. As a district, we would say this: can this boat and crew do what this mission calls for? Can we plan with the strengths we have? Do we have gaps? Can we fill these gaps? The same captain used to say all the time, we're not going to use a gun to open a beer can. Make sure the tools you have are appropriate for the job. And if we don't have those tools and it would be too difficult to implant new tools, then maybe we should stick with what we work with. And the last one I think is the most important. Survival isn't winning. If you go on a mission and half the crew dies, but the mission was completed, it's not a win. You can't get back home with half the crew. The plan must go further than the one mission. The crew must be viable for the next task. What's it going to look like when we're done? Sending people into harm's way is a terrible privilege. And you as a board hold that now. I'm going to assume that none of you signed up for this. I would hope that there hasn't been a member of the school board who said, hopefully someday I'll be able to determine whether or not people go and possibly face death. But you have that now. And please don't think I'm being dramatic. I've known people who've lost people to this disease. And I think it's unfortunately safe to say that maybe 80% of us know someone who's at least caught the disease or had a scare. According to the CDC, if the rate of transmission stays as it is now, which it does not suggest it will do, COVID-19 will have 150,000 deaths by the end of 2020. That would make it the 4th leading cause of death in the United States. It'll beat out strokes. It'll beat out Alzheimer's. It'll beat out car accidents. And I know that this is not an easy decision to come up with the plan that you have. And I know the plan for hybrid seems all right. But I think that remote learning is probably the best thing for all of us. It's the safest. And the time invested in the amount of moving parts that you have with this plan, the more complex the machine, the more likely it's going to break down. And that's engineering. That's statistics, that's engineering. And I think that if we have a simpler system, which we do already, stay at home and work with people, I think that's the way to go. I also want to point out, remember Lloyd, you brought up, you asked the question if there were any guidelines out there that you know of, and the board said no. Well, it turns out the IFT has said that remote learning is what it suggests. FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Association, has said that the guidelines are that every person should have 113 square feet of space in order to avoid transmission with or without a mask. Shorthand would be 25% of any room's occupancy would be the number. So that's why we have, 50 here? What's the occupancy? Less? Okay. Let's see. Summit Hill is going all distance learning. So is the school districts of Oak Park and River Forest. And, Evanston, Wilmette, a couple other ones up north. And also, personally, when I became a parent, my life changed, as it did for anyone who's a parent. And I want to say that parents sacrifice for their children. Parents don't sacrifice their children. I think we could all agree now that the prophet Abraham was a pretty crappy father figure. I'm not willing to let my kids into a situation that's dangerous, where I don't know that they'll be safe. And I know that my commanders would never send me into a place that they knew was unsafe unless it was absolutely essential. And since we know that distance learning works, It worked for my kids. I know it worked for some other people. It wasn't perfect, but it got better, and it'll continue to get better the more we do it. I think we should stick with it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Beth Cromray, and I have a 3rd grader and I have a 7th grader enrolled in the district. And I'm going to be the complete opposite of our last 2 speakers. So in April, my husband had COVID, and he got it at work. And at the time, I'm not quite sure, they weren't wearing masks. And I didn't know it at the time, and he came home, and there was probably 2 to 3 days, where he had been exposed, and he was in the house, and he was around, us. We didn't get it. The girls and I, and myself, we did not get it. He was very asymptomatic. We were very blessed, that we didn't get sick. It just goes to kind of prove kind of those points about, kids getting the symptoms. I know that's not the case, with every kid and so forth. But we were very fortunate. I know all of the work that you guys put into this was not easy. I'm currently working in a school district, in the district office, where they have chosen to go to 5 days in learning, also with 5 days, remote learning. I know it's not an easy option. I know there's so many things to take into consideration. I get that. I am of the mindset that we are doing our kids a huge disservice to not even give them the option to do 5 days in class. I was at home with my kids doing the e-learning, this spring. And I understand it's going to be a more robust, program. I get that. But the dynamic for them at home is so different than what it is in class. Their attention span is not there. They're not engaged the way that they are in class. And I know that you guys have taken those things into consideration. But we have been given an opportunity by the state of Illinois, by Governor Pritzker, to allow these kids to come in for 5 days. Until I think we go back to phase 3, if we do, I think we should work as hard as possible to get the kids into 5 days, even if it's a shortened day, to allow that opportunity to clean more. I mean, because I just think that a huge opportunity for them to be in class for 5 days, because I think of how it happened in the spring. And again, I understand that things aren't, that it's not going to be the same. And again, to your point, Rick, parents are going back to work. I mean, when we were lifted into stage 4, and I understand it's not the district's position to figure out the means for daycare, but are parents going to send their kids to Ivy League, and they're going to have to try and figure out how to do remote learning in a big open area? And if they're in an Ivy League situation, I mean, that's not going to be conducive to learning either. More and more parents are going back to work, and so that's going to be a burden with this cohort, where now I've got kids in class 3 days a week. They're going to be home 2 days a week. I mean, I feel like it should be either all or nothing at this point. And I feel like if the surveys had gone out and parents weren't given so many options, the parents who maybe had picked the hybrid learning over e-learning, that may have pushed them over the edge to be like, I'm going to just pick e-learning, because there were just too many options, and that may have pushed them one way over the other. So, and I hope that there was another consideration taken for the Zoom and a paid subscription, because after so many minutes, the connection becomes poor. And that's another concern. With this e-learning, and they're home and they're sitting, you know, they're sitting in front of a screen all day long, those connections become very poor. I mean, is that something that's being looked at, you know, technology-wise? You know, I mean, I hope there's a lot of those things that were taken into consideration as things that happened into the fall or into the spring. You know, I look around and there's so many other things opening, and this is our new norm. I mean, we all, I think, can agree that this is not going away for a while. Masks, you know, this pandemic, I mean, it's not going to go away for a while. We are not going to move into stage 5 for a while, and I think we have to figure out a way to be able to operate, you know, effectively, you know, in this stage and be productive. And I'm just not sure. I was a little bit concerned when it was mentioned that we're going to approve this for a year. Because what if our numbers continue to go down? Is there not going to be any consideration to move them into, you know, a 5-day in-class, you know, situation? I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The community should just make statements. We can't
okay.
engage that
Okay.
topic.
Well, that's just a question out there that I think parents would like addressed at some point. So, just my thoughts.
Thank you.
But thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jennifer Brown, and I am get my name down real quick. I am a longtime parent in the district and a former FERC PTO board member and a current CMS PACT member. I am also a fellow educator, and I've been a classroom teacher for 18 years. I'm speaking tonight to express my great concern about the needs of my daughter Lily and other special education students in our district. Lily will be transitioning to 6th grade at CMS this fall. As a full inclusion district, 146 has always met Lily's extensive needs through special education, speech, assistive tech, OT, PT, and social work. Lily also requires and completely relies on a one-on-one paraprofessional to communicate and to access her education environment. Remote learning simply does not work for my child and many others like her. This is through no fault of the teachers. They are trying their very best given these very challenging circumstances. As a nonverbal child with severe apraxia, Lily can't communicate or engage through an iPad screen. Her needs are not being met, and she has regressed tremendously without hands-on therapies and in-person learning. She has not been receiving the free and appropriate education that she has a right to. I urge the school board to consider the specific needs of our special education population as you finalize your transition plan. I fear that these students will be left out and left behind with remote learning even for half the time. District 146 is unique in its full inclusion programming, and you must represent the needs and the voices of our special education population in your plan. I would like to add that I'm thankful and relieved to hear about the Cohort C option, and I do believe that it's absolutely critical for our special needs families. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm Shayna Brighton. I have twins, and they're going into 2nd grade, and I have a 3rd grader. Just putting it out there that other states have put twins in the same classrooms. I know that we pride ourselves on putting them in separate. I completely agree, but at this point, to limit exposure and to praise me as a maybe hybrid teaching, maybe homeschooling kind of, deal. If we can put them in the same class, that would be preferred.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Sarah Lopez, and I'm a longtime District 146 parent as well. My daughter will be entering Central as a 6th grader, and I've got a little guy who'll be entering 2nd grade at Fulton, and my youngest will be entering kindergarten, also at Fulton. So it'll be my youngest will be like her first transition to like a real education type atmosphere. Right. My concern for my 2nd grader, since the spring virtual learning began, he has regressed academically a ton. He's been slowly been evaluated by one therapist for sensory processing disorder and struggles, and therapy, speech therapy, and a lot of social and emotional components that I had communicated to a great deal with his 1st grade teacher. Her and I were able to work quite closely, and I had expressed lots of concerns to her. He regressed a ton, and toward the very latter part of the e-learning experiences that he and I had, it was awful. He struggled, I struggled. It was tears from him, tears from myself, and he's a very bright kid, and he's taken several steps back, and he lost focus, and his ability to communicate and feel that he could be a part of an academic setting behind a screen, despite the fact that he does well socializing only through YouTube videos and gaming and that type of thing that so many kids associate with now, but he only can communicate and socialize best while he is gaming. One-on-one, he struggles terribly. So being behind a screen but having to give feedback, he can't do it. It's virtually impossible for him right now, and I've not been able to find the help for him, but it's been my understanding that he qualifies for an IEP. My concern is with the struggles going on now, and that he's not potentially going to get some more focus and struggle, and the needs potentially may not be met, because I feel that he could qualify for an IEP and some more attention and some more need and all of that type of stuff. And my concern is that his needs won't be met. And for the 6th graders and 7th and 8th graders and stuff, will there not be a passing period? Will they just stay in one classroom their entire duration of their day? Will they not be meeting back in here for their lunchroom? Will there won't be a cafeteria option for these kids? Just kind of wondering those things. I didn't hear any of that addressed, so I'm wondering, has that been addressed? Has that been discussed? What was my other concern? Now, with a lockdown, gosh forbid, at least for Fulton and Central, where my kids are students, there has not been a need for a total lockdown. We've had, soft down drills and those types of things, but if there's the need where there's a lockdown, when these kids need to be, I've been told by the administration and the teachers and stuff that they kind of huddle behind desks, all in a group, and like farther from windows, and they have like a drill and a protocol and things that have been able to take place, and they've been proven that that's what needs to be done. That can't happen now. What kind of guidelines or what kind of considerations or questions have been considered or are in place if, gosh forbid, there's a need for a lockdown? God forbid, let's hope that never is a concern or question, but it's something that we also have to consider, right? What about a tornado drill or a fire drill or a snow day? Those are things too that, I just know that my kindergartner, she's very, very bright, and I don't know how she can learn to read or write sentences and full words and do all of those things without the minimal help she'll allow me to give her virtually. Not to mention socially, this is like when these kids grow so much socially together and trying to figure out if at all they can just kind of grow socially, you know, and figure out where, if at all, they kind of meet with this group of kids, or not this group, but maybe this group of kids. And that's my best friend today. She's my best friend tomorrow as well, but not, you know, and socially they need that, but I just don't, I'm not very 100% confident that this e-learning is a great option, but I'm not 100% confident that in the classroom is the best option either. So I'm just concerned that a lot of these other questions haven't been answered either. If there's a lockdown, kids with special needs that have not been addressed last school year, my son is, I'm slowly working on getting him some answers and some help, and struggling to find him some therapy and the necessary paperwork that needs to be brought into the school to have an IEP, stuff that needs to be done. But I'm wondering how those needs to be met, you know, and just a lot of things that, you know, I trust that you guys are going to do as best as you're able, and I wouldn't want to be in your shoes, but I know, you know, I know here are parents. I empathize and I struggle with it as well. So, you know, I appreciate the thought and the concern and the effort. But my concerns kind of echo everybody's here, and it's just for these kids, and socially and academically, and it's for the staff as well. I have never had this staff, every single staff person, from the janitorial staff people to teachers, administration, everybody has been so amazing, from every need, every question, every concern I've ever had, coming from the Fulton, the grade school level, up here to Central. I've got a child now, will be a sophomore at Tinley, so I've never ever had major concerns until these health issues that we don't really have control over now, right? So just a lot of other questions and thoughts, and wondered at what point should we start preparing ourselves and our children for what that first day will look like, you know? So, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Erin Pizarek, and I have 3 children, 2 different districts, 3 schools. I was able to witness the remote learning from grade school, middle school, and high school this spring. And as it was brought up earlier this evening, this learning loss that we feel that we've suffered in the spring because of the pandemic and the uncertainty of where we're going with all of this, I think is only going to grow if we continue to push for 100% remote learning in the fall. Nothing can replace a classroom, a student, and a teacher. I understand the need to keep them safe. I also understand the need to educate these children. I have 2 kids that are going into a transitional period, a 5th grader and an 8th grader. How are we going to bridge that gap for these students to prepare for the next chapter, going into 6th grade, going to be a freshman in high school? My 8th grader is going to take high school placement tests. I don't know where he's going to shake out because of this learning loss that we have suffered. I encourage you to think long and hard about that, as I know you have addressed it, the education, the safety, which is our first priority with our children. But I think above all, we have to prepare these students for the next chapter in their life, because COVID's going to probably be here forever, and I'm hopeful that the last 6 months is not what our new world looks like. So we have to move beyond that. And in baby steps, I hope that we can do that with our students and our children this fall. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jamie Hubbard. I have 2 children, one at Fulton and one here at Central. So I just want to say, without presenting a 5-day plan, how can anybody make an educated decision? I feel like I can't understand if you don't propose the full plans, 5-day, hybrid, e-learning, how can we decide? I also have a huge problem with the 2-day hybrid, 3-day hybrid, whatever you want to call it. Let's face the facts. Kids are going to go to daycare, and that is not a controlled environment. And we're going to allow Ivy League to house our schools after school or the days we don't have school, and we feel that safer than our classrooms. I have a huge problem with that. I hear parents are making plans to have 5, 10 kids at their house. I thought we were doing this so that we can keep the kids in small groups. But now we cannot control what parents do outside of school, right? Yes, but we can control a little more than what we are. So what is the purpose of 2 days then? They're literally going to be exposed to everybody, to so much more than they would have been if they were here at school for 5 days. So why even come to school for 2 days or 3 days, whatever week it is? To me, it's pointless. Here, go to daycare where there's 300 kids there and then come back to school for 2 days. Limited. That's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Amy Golden. I have 2 kids who are at Ferrick. I'm also an educator. I've been teaching I'm about to start my 22nd year. And I want to reiterate the point that a few other people have made, that the remote learning in the spring is not what remote learning is supposed to be. I was thinking back to, I think our last day of school was March 13th, if I'm correct. At the beginning of that week, none of us had any idea that we'd be out for the next however many months. And even after that, as teachers and as parents, but teachers especially who were doing the planning, we kept getting these ideas of like, well, we might be back in 2 weeks. Oh, well, we don't know what the governor's gonna do. So everything was just, we had no idea what the grading policies were gonna be. We had no idea what was happening. So it was not optimal conditions by a long stretch. Now, that being said, I felt very moved in April to write a long email to both Dr. Sawick and Dr. Ahern, our principal, about what an amazing job my kids' teachers were doing in this really bad situation. So my sons both have IEPs, and I counted up there are about 20 adults who work with my children in different capacities. And in the week that I wrote that email, all 20 had had some kind of contact with my kids. That's amazing, considering the conditions that we were under. And it seems to me really problematic to be like, wow, they did such a great job, let's reward them by putting them in conditions that are putting them at risk. And 5 days a week, I'm sorry, that is really, really dangerous for teachers. Because we don't know much about what's happening with kids, but we do know about adult spread. And we have teachers and staff members who are, immune compromised, who are older, and who live with people like that. We cannot put them in that kind of danger. We just don't know enough. I think the hybrid plan that you guys came up with sounds amazing. It sounds really great. However, I hope that you guys hold off on it for a little bit and start remote learning like a lot of other districts are doing. And they're reassessing in October to see okay, well, how are things going? I do feel like if we gave teachers, and I'm talking about it from my own point of view too, I teach high school English. If I had the time to kind of put all of that all the time and effort we're putting into making this hybrid work with and instead made that into making the best remote learning that we could, then hopefully in a few months, maybe we can reassess and move to the hybrid. That would be my suggestion. So thank you for all your time. I know that this is a difficult decision for everybody. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
Can't spell my own name all of a sudden. Good evening. My name is Shane Wilson. I'm the parent of a 7th grader here at Central. I had the privilege to be here and to address you a week ago when you initially presented this plan. And at the time, Dr. Staywick said that it was his expectation that no matter what choice you made, you would make a quarter of us unhappy. That's very clear from the reactions you're getting tonight. I am very pleased to tell you I'm not in that quarter. And the reason I am not in that quarter is because you have a remote option. If you didn't have a remote option, I would be making my own remote option, because I am astounded to say that somehow we still continue to underestimate the severity, the deadliness of this disease. And that continues to inform some of the decisions that we're making. The fact that we are continuing to push for a set of circumstances where we are going to put our children in close proximity to each other without being able to contain this virus, without being able to contain this disease. Mr. Golden was very kind when he cited the latest figures on cases, when he said 165,301. I think he omitted the part about the fact that we have 7,347 fatalities. That's a roughly 4.4% fatality rate. And that number's gone up since we looked at these numbers exactly 1 week ago when we were in this situation. And even the best elements of the hybrid plan that you've presented have holes in it that will allow potentially for this virus to propagate itself among the population of these schools. When we talked about quarantining after someone is exposed to the virus, forgive me if I'm naming it wrong, but I think Ms. Wogan said, we're considering that possibly we won't need to quarantine teachers who've been exposed to that child, or children who've been exposed to that teacher or that employee. And what little evidence we have suggests that that's a very dangerous approach to take. You know, a summer camp in Missouri had a 31-point plan to protect against this virus. They had temperature checks, and they had regular cleaning, and they had distancing, and they ended up with 82 sick kids and counselors in less than a month. Every effort was made to protect them, and they couldn't be protected. So I urge you, when you vote, if you're going to pursue this plan, that you definitely have this remote option, because it's so critical that we have the opportunity to not force our children into a circumstance where they are in danger. And to that, I want to address two things that I'd like you to consider as how to implement the remote plan. We've talked about the going from 3 hours to 5 hours, the fact that there's been an opportunity for more planning, for more opportunity to make this succeed, and I appreciate that and I encourage that. One thing is definitely the socialization element. I urge you to consider that however these classes are taught, that there is an opportunity for interaction. Some of what we saw last spring was an extremely one-sided conversation. A teacher coming onto a screen, saying a bunch of things, asking them to push thumbs up or thumbs down, and that's the end of it. My son is in band camp right now. It started on Monday, and we're seeing that very same thing, and it's partially the limitations of Zoom, it's partially the limitations of our imaginations, that we can't think of anything to do other than block off any communication between kids amongst themselves, any communication between kids and teachers. It's just too hard, I guess, to do that. And I urge you to please factor in opportunities for interaction as part of this, more than just office hours. You talked about virtual clubs. That's a key element. Other events should be made virtual if possible. Dances and sock hops, maybe even lunch opportunities, that there's a chance for the kids who are at home having lunch to make that a communal experience, to take advantage of the technology, to allow a level of socialization that we all want, we all mourn its loss, but let's not just ignore it just because there's a remote element. And that leads to the other thing that I want to really beg of you, and that is to involve us as parents in this education. I know it's habitual, I understand why, for teachers to be very much in control of their curriculum, very much in control of how they want to lay, how they want to teach their class. But the fact of the matter is, we as parents are now in the position not just of trying to make sure that they're following a teacher's instructions, not just in the position of trying to make sure that they're following through on their homework. We're actually proxies. We're actually stand-ins. If there's no opportunity to speak to a teacher, or there's no opportunity to say, what did she mean by that, or what was he asking me to do, we have to step in and say, well, this is what's being taught, or this is the lesson that we're trying to convey. And we can only do that if teachers communicate to us, in particular in advance, what's coming, what's being taught. That means we need to have access to the syllabus, or we need to have access to the message. We need to know why a book is being taught. And maybe that's just a paragraph, or maybe that's just 5 minutes of explanation, but it's not just teaching us how to use Schoology, it's teaching us how to be your on-site teacher's assistant. It's teaching us how to be there to help your message be conveyed. So I guess what I'm saying is I am going to take the remote option one way or the other. That's, to me, the only choice, the only safe choice for my son. But I want to help these schools. I want to help these teachers. I want to help with the educational experience to make it as robust, to make it as effective, to make it as accelerated as we can do under the unfortunate circumstances that we're in. My wife is watching me right now, so I want her to know that I listened to her when I told her that I would greatly appreciate the efforts that you put into this plan. We greatly appreciate everybody who collaborated on this. And the fact that so little of this plan has changed in the past week since you presented it tells me that you've really come up with the best solution that you can to a mostly unsolvable problem. And we're very grateful for that. After you vote, the hard work really begins. It's really making this work. And so I strongly encourage you to make sure that the things you want to accomplish, you keep working with us, you keep talking to us, you keep tweaking, you keep adjusting, you keep making it as effective and as powerful as it can be. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Mary Day. I live and work in District 146. I am not under 10 years old. I began my teaching career in the 90s. Teachers who are my age and older may remember the 90s as the time when teaching changed forever. Society abruptly informed us in the 90s that being a teacher means that at some point we may be asked to protect our students' safety in ways that we never had before imagined. We all vowed that we would put our students' safety above all else. That is why I stand before you now. This is not a situation I'm comfortable with and have been debating the entire time about coming up. But I feel so strongly and continue to believe in putting my students' safety above all else. I never thought a day would come when I would be asking, begging, that my students and my safety be treated at a minimum with the same care and concern as grocery store cashiers who only interact with people through plexiglass barriers for 1 to 3 minutes at a time. Our students and staff deserve the dignity and respect for our lives of providing at least 6 feet, if not offered
a much more desirable, safe remote setting. Please do not put our children and staff 3 feet apart, let alone 3 feet without such plexiglass barriers for hours at a time in buildings that do not have the same ventilation or air exchange as hospitals or other high-risk settings. We just don't seem to know enough yet, particularly about the lasting effects on those who do recover. Nor do we seem to have enough protections in our midst to keep them safe. Yes, I absolutely still put my students' safety above all else, and I ask that you too do the same, please.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Giamona. I'm a teacher at FIRC. I have a 3-year-old daughter who, at 3 months old, had to have open heart surgery because she has a complex heart defect. And because of that, I'm on a family council at Advocate Children's Hospital, and I had the unique experience actually this morning to meet with all of the cardiologists and the infectious disease doctors there to talk about this exact thing, because they are getting questions after questions, should I send my child to school? Now, their concern are the medically complex children, but they were talking about the entire group. And I left there without an answer because I really wanted to know, should I send my child to school or my children to school? Should I go to work to keep my family safe? Their response was they don't know how this is going to affect children because our children have been quarantined since March, for the most part. Our children are not the ones being dragged to grocery stores, for the most part. Our children aren't the ones that were in daycare until phase 4 started. They don't know how it's going to affect. But what they do know is that since phase 4 started, they've had a 25% increase in children with COVID at that particular hospital right here in Chicago. They do know that they have ordered 50% more pediatric body bags than they have in the past in anticipation of what school opening is going to do. They don't know if they're going to have to use them, but they are anticipating use of some, if not all. They don't know the lasting effects. So what I want you to take into consideration is those unknowns of our children, of our students, that they may get it and recover, but forever have to be on oxygen. They may get it and recover and forever have to be on heart medication. We don't know the lasting effects for our children or our adults. So it's not necessarily a number of deaths for COVID, because I'm a math teacher, I can do the numbers. It's the percentage of deaths to the percentage of tested and positive is small, but that doesn't mean that our lasting effects are awful or aren't awful. So I just want you to consider what the choice that you're asking me as a teacher to do and the choice that you're asking me as a parent to do to send my child to school. It's a really hard choice with all of these unknowns. And I know you guys have done so much research and you're trying to do the best for everybody involved, but I want you to take into consideration that it's not just about that 3-foot distance or that 6-foot distance. It's about our kids, and it's about their safety, and it's about my safety and the safety of just going home and having to take off my clothes and take a shower in the garage if I can before I bring it into my house. You know, who knows what I'm exposed to. So please take into consideration that we don't know the effects on the kids. We don't know it. So if we don't know what the effects are on the kids, our best option in my eyes right now is remote. Did I like being a remote teacher? No. Do I want to be a remote teacher? No. But I also want all my kids safe and healthy. And when I say my kids, I don't just mean the 3 little girls at home. I want all of my students safe and healthy. And I think we could do a much better job than we did in the spring with the training. So please take that into consideration.
Thanks, Lise.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment? Is there any from the?
Can just be sure that we've gotten everybody from the other rooms.
Yes. Is there any public comment from the overflow rooms?
No.
Keegan, everyone's been heard, Keegan.
Okay, moving on. We're moving on to the action item. I need a motion for the approval.
We'll make it, since we're not going anywhere until somebody does or not. I move that the Board of Education approve the resolution of the transition plan for the reopening schools in 2020-21 as presented.
Is there any discussion? Okay, Secretary, call the roll.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes. I'd like to thank the community for coming out and giving us your input. It's vitally important. The school district is trying to do the best it can in this pandemic, which has crept into everybody's lives in the worst way. So we will, our number one priority is safety, and that's what we're committed to do. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Secretary, call the roll.
Yes.
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 Yes, we are adjourned. Thank you for coming out.
Thanks, John.